Welcome to the Hodja on Architecture podcast. Video Game Architecture. Chapter 5, The Narrative Surrounding. Architecture, or space, is used for narrative purposes, as seen in ancient theaters, where volume and scenery are utilized. Over the last 2.5 centuries, the film and television industry has also heavily employed architectural concepts for storytelling purposes. And in the previous 60 years, video games have been introduced as a brand new visual medium. Architecture is also directly utilized in video games, as well as in other similar media, however, with a significant difference. The distinctive nature of the built worlds in video games as spatial environments lies in their availability for interaction and navigation, much like the real world. The audience, in this case gamers, is in complete control of the environmental experience, unlike other visual media which evaluate them as passive spectators perceiving the space through fixed perspectives. Moreover, in the linear storytelling of previous media, the story is straightforward and the ending is the same for everyone. In contrast, video games offer a more personalized experience, as both the direction of the story and the outcome of the ending are determined by the player's actions, facilitated by the game's architecture. Now it is the golden age of video game storytelling, and the designers of these games are treated like celebrities at the game conferences worldwide. The character design they put forward eases storytelling by defining characters. At the same time, the world and structures they build do the same by describing the setting. These constructed worlds are undoubtedly three-dimensional narrative spaces with obvious architectonic concepts, offering new possibilities for interaction. Environmental storytelling is widely accepted as a key element in the success of a video game. Many of these video games draw spatial inspiration from physical architecture to create more accurate imaginary worlds. The use of architecture in video games differs significantly from that in other visual media, especially in three-dimensional open-world video games. However, comparing their world building with the authentic architecture, they somehow mimic or are considered in a close relationship. Numerous similarities and differences can also be observed. Both the architects and game designers use the spaces and structures for the same purpose. Most of the time, real-world architecture reflects the culture and history of a society, and the same is true within game worlds. When world building is successful, game architecture embodies the morals and values of the fictional people who inhabit it. In this context, the architecture helps players understand the built world as a storytelling element. The need for gamers to perceive architecture in video games stems from its real-world function, which the audience is already familiar with. In successful cases, the architecture makes the players believe they are in a real-world setting rather than a fictional one. Moreover, both the game designers and architects use similar working methods in their planning and development phases. They primarily work with three-dimensional computer-generated models, which serve as the fundamental interface between the two disciplines, enabling mutual exchange. The similarity between these two architectures has even been unified recently. Relatively new input devices, such as motion detectors and gesture recognizers, hybridize the virtual and real worlds, as seen in Nintendo Wii and similar consoles. Away from this, video games migrated outdoors and integrated physical environment and game space via augmented reality solutions like Pokémon Go. And it is now the threshold of a new movement introducing three-dimensional virtual worlds focused on social connection, also known as the buzzword metaverse, experienced via augmented reality and virtual reality wearable technology controller inputs. The rationale for architecture in reality differs from the reasons why architecture is used in video games. The primary difference between virtual worlds and physical places is that the former are not real. They are maintained entirely by computers and exist only in the imagination. In the real world, the place is a natural consequence of space, whereas in virtual worlds, the space should be represented. To date, there have been three main representation formats: nodes for textual worlds, grids for isometrical worlds, and polygons for three-dimensional worlds. Polygons represent surfaces, and the space between them becomes the apparent volume. Therefore, in video game environments, both structures and landscapes are abstractions of reality. Since the entire world is in a computer-generated identity, even the rural and unsettled areas become artificial. Here, the wilderness is also a built environment, or architecture, composed of polygons. Additionally, neither gravity nor climate is the default in virtual worlds, unless explicitly defined. Therefore, the architectural concepts of load and support, climate-responsive design, sustainability, and budget do not remain on the agenda of structural design. This reality undoubtedly transcends the limits of architecture, unlike physical conditions. Architectural materials do not behave as they do in the physical world, since they are merely bitmaps attached to the polygon surfaces. John Bruchut, in The Importance of Architecture in Video Games and Virtual Worlds, states, 500 years from now, there is a good chance you will still be able to play an old copy of Skyrim, but what will be left of the physical city artifact that exists today? They will be ruins at best. The cosmetic identity of the materials in video game worlds only works in terms of meanings linked to them from real-life experiences. In architecture, materials have their own language, and architects use them as a design and evaluation mechanism. Another main difference between video game worlds is their quantity. Like a three-dimensional chat room, they connect people from geographically disparate locations worldwide in real time. However, they act more like a stage than a chat room in that the actions of millions of other players are witnessed. What happens when this population exceeds the carrying capacity of the virtual ecosystem? This world is cloned. In the physical environment, there is only one planet for people. However, exact copies of the entire game world can be easily created to offer overflow somewhere to go. Some games even connect these parallel worlds to separate servers, each with its own difficulty levels, player density, or other game mechanics. Therefore, when game spaces are already a parallel world simulation for the physical environment, or a fantastic escape from everyday life, they also have exact parallels. This alignment between real-world architecture and its virtual counterpart is not merely a matter of visual resemblance or representational mimicry. It extends into the conceptual realm, where structures in video games often perform similar cultural, symbolic, and spatial functions as those in physical environments. Yet, as the medium advances, the architectural language in games begins to diverge from its real-world constraints. The familiar rules of material behavior, structural necessity, and environmental response slowly give way to a new set of priorities, those driven by narrative, immersion, and gameplay mechanics. In this shift, architecture in video games starts to operate beyond its traditional limits, evolving into a form of expressive design that is unconstrained by the laws of gravity, weather, or cost. This transformation leads us to a critical distinction between the virtual and the real. Architecture no longer represents the world, but reimagines it. The architecture here finally breaks free from the bonds of physical and budgetary limitations of the real world and becomes wholly narrative. Especially in the game worlds of the fantastic genre, it is clear that architecture plays a leading role in identification. Since there is a high probability of the existence of non-human, intelligent, and civilized races with distinct cultures, the architecture, without a doubt, has to serve in terms of its storytelling skills. The fictional identities of these constructed indigenous cultures cannot be told without the design of perfectly matched vernacular architecture. This concludes the video game architecture, Chapter 5, The Narrative Surrounding. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode.